Welcome everyone back to the second episode of the second season of Trash Takes. I'm your host, Theo Aronstan, joined by Wesley Jeng, Jacob Shia, and Hajime Sano. We have Steve producing the whole shebang in the back once again, and Jerry on the camera behind the scenes. Today, as our special guest, we have with us Cole, who played Gaston in Beauty and the Beast, and Quincy, who played Lumiere in Beauty and the Beast. Today, we wanted to arrange our episode in a way where we would discuss different, social, gender stereotypes, different things. Well, we just kind of discuss on our episodes, but in a media and and theater and acting setting. But before we get into the meat of this podcast, it's been so long since we filmed an episode. So much has happened in between the 3 or 4 months. How has your guys'? It's a long time, but how has your guys' winter breaks been? And how has your guys' life been for you guys?
It's been pretty good. I mean, of course, it's kind of a stressful time right now. I mean, because people say second semester senior year is easy and stuff, and I don't think it's easy. I think it's been pretty tough. And then there's been all the stressful stuff like with the college and stuff. What do you guys think?
I mean, maybe it's just because I took easier classes this year, right? But just something about it. I just don't have the drive to do much of anything anymore. It's kind of weird. Even songwriting, I love doing songwriting, but past couple of months have just been super dry, and it's been a little strange.
I'm kind of in the same boat as Wesley. Like I've just been used to trying at school. If you're gonna do something, you may as well do it to the best of your ability. So that's just been what I've been used to. So it's been hard to get rid of that mindset. Second semester senior year, I don't think I will get rid of that mindset. I think I'll just power through right to college.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like once you flip that switch of not trying that's hard in school, especially the way that we're conditioned, it's so difficult, especially when you have to turn it back on, and it affects other extracurriculars. I don't know, I don't once the musical ended. I just sort of felt like Hajime said, just less of a motive to do stuff. But so, and also college stuff coming out being stressful. So I don't know, it's kind of just running out the clock. But, break has been refreshing. These past few weeks have been refreshing.
Yeah, I would sort of agree with all of you. And I feel especially since it's second semester, I've noticed on assignments, I'm okay, maybe I don't have to try as hard as this. And I don't know, lucky enough for me, I was able to figure out where I was going to college pretty early on, so that hasn't really been too big of stress for me.
Yeah. Isn't it Oregon? Congrats, yeah.
Thank you, man.
That's exciting.
Congrats.
Yeah, I'd say for me, I found a decent amount of drive doing stuff that's just every single thing that's not schoolwork. Just track, the podcast, the merch rollout. Oh, yeah. But now I just go home, I lay on the couch, and I'm dang, I got a shit ton of late assignments that I got to get in. But yeah.
Yeah, and I even feel that's kind of creeped in. I mean, I feel for me, the second semester, I don't know, second semester-ness has creeped into our even this show. Because I mean, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but we've been a little bit bad on our episode schedule recently. But I don't know. I feel that's just a product of the world coming back into person and stuff. With all of us doing sports, it's just been tough getting us all together in one room. But we've done it, and we're here today.
We're here.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, let's get it.
So how this episode initially came to be was during Beauty and the Beast, the musical rehearsals. I was conversing about the podcast with Cole, and Cole was if you ever need a guest, just I could be your guy, let me on. And then Quincy, I think, was right next. He's next to him. Cole was I could have Quincy on too. And Cole was I could talk about a whole bunch of things. I could talk about theater. And then I think for me, it was that could be a whole episode. So I ran it by Wesley. And the thing about Wesley is he loves musicals. His number one, his Spotify rap's probably just Mamma Mia, something along those lines. So yeah, now this episode today is going to be essentially just focused on musicals, theater, and how gender stereotypes have played into the past and how we've seen them pop up today. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we might just go into the more just the general sense of media and just we'll see where the conversation takes us, I suppose. But I guess first off, I should say congratulations to you three, because the musical was hype. I know it's a little bit late, but the musical was super hype. I loved it. It was awesome. And yeah, it was cool. So I don't know. I don't even know where should we begin with Beauty and the Beast. Should we talk about like things? Well, let's just talk about Let's start with something positive. Like, what do we think Beauty and the Beast does well in terms of like gender portrayals and stuff?
I don't know. I like when I look at Beauty and the Beast, I think it's really interesting how the Beast, who's the main character, he's sort of seen as like unlovable when he's really stubborn and when he's like really unemotive, which is kind of like how men are taught to act in our current society. But like when he starts opening up and when he starts emoting more and when he starts being more sensitive, that's when Belle really starts to see him as like, oh, he's not just this one-dimensional guy. Like he cares a lot about a lot of different things. So I think it's really good in perpetuating that sort of thing, where it's like you can't just be one-dimensional. You can't just have like these hard-set, stubborn emotions. And you can't just be like a typical guy. You have to do all these other stuff. You have to be emotive. You have to be a good caretaker in order to, you know, find success in this world, which I think was really interesting because I didn't really think a lot of other forms of media were doing stuff similar to that.
Kind of want to touch on the character Gaston for a second. The fact that he's so just unlikable. No offense, sorry.
I agree.
But the fact that his character is just so unlikable. He's masculinity to an almost satirical extent, right? Like he takes Belle's book and throws it into the mud because he doesn't want women reading or something, right? But I think the fact that he's so unlovable, right, that also kind of goes against the typical, like, men are supposed to be aggressive, domineering, and that's what will get you, like, what you want. That's what will get you, you know, girlfriends or something. So I thought that was super cool too.
Yeah. Just the juxtaposition between the Beast and Gaston. And, you know, as someone who had to play Gaston, that was kind of tricky for me just because I like to feel like I'm not a massive misogynist in that, I think women should read. I think, unlike Gaston, so it was a bit difficult, like kind of getting into that mindset, but also it was also kind of nice just because it's nice playing something completely different to how you act in real life. But yeah, Gaston, very bad guy, but very fun to play just because of how cartoonish he is and how like unlikable he is. Like he's just such a cartoon villain, which I really like. But also it lets the Beast really shine because the Beast is a great guy. The Beast learns that he has to be emotive and he has to be like a real man, I guess, sort of, and Gaston is kind of just one dimensional.
Yeah. But I also think it is kind of interesting to think, though, that although that is true, and I understand that Gaston is portrayed in an unlikable sense, it is true that Gaston is the main man in town. He's got everybody loves him. Basically the whole town loves him. He's got the whole song about him. While I do get that, well, I don't know how I feel about that because. I mean, I think that is kind of reflective, I think, of real life. Because, I mean, I feel like in some sense, in some social circles, you do get that popularity, that fame, that quote-unquote success, if you do follow those standards more so than if you were more like the fuller character like the Beast. So I'm just curious about what do you guys think of that? Because, I mean, it is showing that side of it, the fame, the popularity, and things like that.
Well, I think the fact that the fact that who's it Gaston is that popular and everybody likes him and he lives up to that, I guess, male charisma that people are expecting. I guess this is sort of analogous to in AP Lit when we read that first passage of The Bluest Eye of Dick and Jane, right? That that stereotypical sort of white middle class American family, right? That ideal, but that ideal is really one-sided, right? It's just like Jane wants someone to play with. The father is doing this. Jane wants someone to play with. The mom is doing this, and it's really set stereotypes. But in the end, that ends up being very, very dry and doesn't have that emotion that the Beast really brings out. So that in the fact that is like such an establishment idea, I guess that's a good thing, is because Disney is trying to drive people away from that establishment idea of Gaston.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Here, can I post one?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
So one sort of interesting thing I was sort of thinking about is, I think from this, obviously in the character of Lumiere isn't misogynist at all, but I was sort of thinking on sort of the way he acts towards his sort of his partner in crime, Babette. And there was one scene in particular where he was sort of like, oh no, and she was sort of like, oh yes. And I was sort of thinking, it's like, oh, I feel like that's maybe almost a little toxic in a way, because he's sort of like using his position to be like, oh, you should do this with me.
Yeah, I don't know. I've always, well, I like the character of Lumiere.
Well, yeah,
like
I
the
wasn't
character.
saying that he was misogynistic as a whole, but I was just saying that one instance was kind of interesting.
Yeah, and I think he does have a line in it where it's like, where it's in the song Human Again. He's like, I'll have like a woman in
A
each
mademoiselle
arm.
on each arm?
Yes,
Yeah.
that, exactly that. So I mean, yeah, I mean, he's kind of, is that kind of like a womanizer? Is that what
I would say yeah, and there's a couple other instances throughout the show where he's sort of like, oh, I'm this smooth talking candlestick who can kind of do whatever I want. And obviously it's not exactly like that, but you sort of get the sense a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that, because I mean, I think in that sense, that's like he has kind of problematic qualities, but he's not portrayed in that unlikable sense like Gaston. So I don't know. Is that something that we think that maybe that could be improved upon in the musical Beauty and the Beast? But I don't know.
Well, I feel like we see that kind of. I feel like we see that Lumiere type of character a lot in sort of movies and TV shows. So I don't necessarily think it was something they should have removed. I just think it's some sort of that's a character that's become part of the culture.
I would kind of like to disagree with that. I think portraying characters like that in a likable manner kind of like subconsciously, it doesn't explicitly say this, of course, like you said, but it unconsciously kind of ingrains in your head, like, this kind of behavior is desirable and good and will get you what you want, right? I feel like maybe I'm like looking into this too deep, but that's the kind of message I get. And like kind of to extend it to even the princess Belle, right? Like not even just Belle, just Disney princesses as a whole. They're young, thin, submissive, and very dependent on their savior person, right? Barring like maybe one exception, but that's generally the trope, right? And what ends up happening is that they get with the guy in the end, they get what they want, and everything's happily ever after. So that, like I said, it ingrains this sort of idea that, oh, being young and thin and submissive and dependent on a man is what will get me what I want. And I think that's kind of problematic, depending on how you look at it. I don't know what you guys think about that.
Yeah, I would say, going back to your point on Lumiere, I hadn't really thought about that before, but I think that's a really interesting point. I think I definitely agree with you on that.
Yeah, it's the similar idea, like the establishmentness of that, like the as you said, the young and thin and submissive, like obviously that's where her popularity is derived, right? That's how Disney makes money. But at the same time, it's that young and thin and submissiveness that leads to personal struggles. So there is that aspect. So yeah, Disney is making the money like they always do, but they're also, I think they do a good job, and they're doing more of a good job of this nowadays. But being kind of anti-establishment in that manner.
Yeah, I think it's back to your point about Belle. I think it's interesting because obviously she was written to be against the status quo. Like they have a whole number. The opening number is all about how she's very different from everyone else because, you know, she reads, she's very smart. She doesn't like Gaston, you know, so I think Disney, they build up their princesses to be like against the status quo or to be a bit different, but it's just very formulaic. If you like, because if you think about another movie like The Little Mermaid, Ariel also wants more than what she has in her life. And I feel like they just kind of are reusing the same formula. So it's kind of fake in how they're deriving that, oh, this character is like not your average girl, like she's different. But when they do that for every single princess movie, it's just kind of it's overused and it's just not what they're trying to get at.
Sorry. Can I?
Yeah, go.
Yeah, I have many gripes with The Little Mermaid. Biggest one
no.
being that even though Ariel was different, she changed her entire identity and became human just so she could be with the guy. I have so many problems with that.
And
I really dislike it.
I mean,
don't
there's
know.
also there's the whole thing where she can't speak and she's
Yeah.
getting into a relationship. I feel like that's high key very problematic. And like in the song "Kiss the Girl," it's like there's the line that's like, "Oh, she won't say a word until you kiss the girl," and I feel like that's pretty dang problematic. A message to be sending to I don't know.
So
young
many
boys.
things about it. Yeah, just the overall idea that like even if you are different, you have to conform to what the man wants so you can also get what you want. And that's messed up. That's messed up.
That's really interesting because I know slowly going back to musicals, like culturally around Grease, things are really changing. Like a lot of people dislike the show Grease because of kind of the same idea. Like the main character changes her appearance and changes how she acts for the guy. And like obviously there are a lot of different things wrong with Grease, but you know, I think because it used to be like this was a classic American musical, and now when people look at it, they're kind of disgusted. They're kind of like, is this really what we want to put on at our high school? Is this really how we want our girls to act? Do we want them to just be submissive and change in order to get the guy? And I mean, I think slowly over time we're going to start seeing those patterns more and more because, as I said, like I think a lot of these stories are based off the same formula and we'll keep digging at it. So I think eventually over time, as the culture continues to shift, we're going to see more of that being exposed and shifting more to like more interesting stories and to more accurate portrayals potentially.
What I'm curious though, I mean, like I don't know, I probably will need more time to think about this, but like, what would be an alternative to this girl is different than the rest, and she's defying the society? Would it be? I mean, obviously this would be a rejection of that, but the opposite extreme would be just them being with the status quo. I mean, what would be the opposite to that, or a good alternative, I should say?
I'm not entirely against the idea of the female character being against the status quo. I think that's really cool. The problem I have with Little Mermaid is that she throws it all away because of the guy. So I don't think like being quirky and unique and different is a bad thing. I think it's actually a good thing. It's just how Disney writes their characters. It's problematic. That's what I think, at least. So, like in the recent Disney movie, like Encanto, I think it's called, right? Encanto. Sorry. I think Disney made a lot of merchandise for. I think the main female character. I forgot her name. What was it?
Luisa? No.
Mirabelle?
Oh my god. Yeah, you're so right, Cole. You're
I
so
never
right.
saw it. I just figured it out.
Isabella?
Is it
I'm
Isabel?
not.
I have no idea.
No idea. It's been a while. They made a lot of merchandise for her because they thought she would be the most popular. But actually, God, I keep blanking on the names.
That one's
The most popular character, was the big, headstrong, super muscular woman. That that character ended up being super popular. I feel like, or not. I feel like she was super popular. Like they had to make more merch for her because more people wanted more merch for her. Right? What was her name? Goodness.
It's Luisa.
Luisa? Okay, cool. Yeah, so being different isn't necessarily bad. Like in the case of Luisa, being different was good, right? Because she kept what made her unique and went with it and made it part of her identity. And I think that's really awesome, right? My problem is throwing away that identity for the purpose of perpetrating like the idea that women are supposed to be submissive and men are supposed to be domineering. That's my biggest issue with Little Mermaid.
I think to answer your question, Wesley, in order to have this not being against being against the status quo, you have to be against the status quo and follow through with that and be consistent in that ideal and not throw it away for a guy like what Hajime is saying. So yeah, Luis is a good example of that. And when it comes down to it, if you want to appeal to an audience, there has to be, you can't be 100% establishment. There has to be some sort of unique aspect that makes you you. And a lot of times you look at more fantasy related plots, or actually that's not a good analogy, but maybe like Lord of the Rings, where like Frodo and the hobbits, they're portrayed as normal people, but they have individual qualities and individual values, and as long as they stick with that, I think that's the right way to go.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I mean, when I originally said that, I didn't mean to say that it was bad, but I just meant I was trying to speak to Cole's point where it kind of felt formulaic, and that this them being different is their whole personality and their whole character arc and the whole reason for the story to exist. But I do agree now that you brought up Louisa and to Jacob's point, I do agree that I think maybe the alternative would be that it's not their character arc, it's just part of them. Like Louisa is just strong. It's not like it's like she's different. It's just who she is, you know?
Yeah, I don't think Belle is a badly written character. I think she's a good heroine. I think, she's smart. She's very intuitive, and she doesn't sacrifice anything to get with the Beast. She's still, you can touch on this later, but shout out Zoe Saldana. She did an amazing job as Belle. But I think the issue is when it becomes like very formulaic, because it's not. I think what would be worse is if Disney just pumped out like very one-dimensional, like submissive, like princesses, which they're not doing. They're making them actually characters. They have ideas, they have goals, they have values. So I think in that sense, they're doing an okay job. But also, like, if they stick to the same formula, eventually it's going to become an issue in itself, which it kind of has already.
Okay. I'm going to bring up my one thing against Belle is that, in the start, she has her whole opening number, and she's like, okay, I wrote down the quote. She's like, okay, I want adventure. I'm not going to sing it. I want adventure in the great wide somewhere. And then blah, 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 blah. And for once, it might be grand to have someone understand. I want so much more than they've got planned. Okay, that was so weird saying that just like straight. That sounded like a rap.
Fantastic rendition.
Yeah, I like that.
Anyways, but I feel like what she's kind of saying there is that she doesn't want to be a part of, Gaston's expectations of what she should be. And that's a wife, or what the town expects her to be, which is, to not read and just be just like any other girl. But she ends up going to this castle where they all want her to date the Beast so they can be free. I mean, that's the definition of being a part of somebody's plan. And just going back to the line, I want adventure in the great wide somewhere. I mean, by the end of the musical, she just ends up going back to the relationship with the Beast. And she's back in that domestic setting where, I don't know, where she was trying to escape in the beginning with the marriage to Gaston. And I just felt like that was a little bit kind of like of a problematic kind of thing. But I mean, I guess in the end she is, and I guess it shows that she is happier with a man, which I guess I could be, but I mean, I feel like that she kind of abandoned her dream of going out and being her own person, being individualistic, things like that.
Yeah, like I said earlier, right? Like, if you get with a man, you're going to be happy, is the message this is sending, I feel like, right? So it teaches little girls that are watching that, like, oh, I have to find a boyfriend, and I have to, like, marry him, and I have to settle down, and I have to listen to everything he says, and then I'll be happy in life, is the kind of message they're getting at, like, 5 or 6 years old or something. That's not the kind of messaging you want to be sending to your children, I feel like.
Can we build off of that point and go somewhere like a little different? Yeah. Do you guys have anything else to add?
I had a new question that kind of formed. I think what my acting teacher does a really good job of is when we come in and out of acting every day, because we're doing Lord of the Flies, that will be at the beginning of April, end of March. I think we think about like what is our intent on what do we want to portray to the audience, like what messages do we want to spread that are deeper than what is in the actual play. and I guess this question is for you too, and I guess it could span to all different walks of like literature. I don't know, but when you put on like when you guys have been in your various like musicals, what do you like? What do you guys think is like your intent, or how do you like kind of put into your own and make it like meaningful and send messages that are more of today's standards? And then inversely, like if you see problematic things within musicals, within various types of media that you're a part of, that you're producing, where do you like, how do you guys like change, or how do you guys like stand up for like what is like correct?
Yeah. So I think, well, I can tackle your last question first because this just came to mind off the rip. But in Beauty and the Beast, there's one scene where Gaston's supposed to grab Belle and kiss her, and I mean, because of COVID, we weren't supposed to do that. But I think if Miss Moore had wanted me to do that, which I don't think she would have, but in a scenario where a director would have wanted me to do that, I think I would have put my foot down and say no, because I don't think you should be like, even though it's shown as being a bad thing to like sexually assault a girl, I don't think like you should be showing that, especially when like a lot of kids go to the show, like because Gaston's like very, if there's something that I want and I can't have it, I'll take it, but I don't know, it didn't really feel like a good part of the show if to include that. But I mean, as someone who's playing very like, because in junior year I played Harry, the investment banker, who's a gay character, and so it's very different going from that to playing Gaston, just because Harry's very sensitive, he's very soft, he sings like a love ballad, whereas Gaston's very forceful, he's very strong, everybody loves him. So I think the way that my message has changed is just like it's showing that Gaston is the villain of the story. He's not someone you should look up to. You can think he's funny. You can think he's like, oh, he's like, look at him, he's super silly. But in the end, he's still the villain of the story. You're not supposed to root for him. You don't want him to get with Belle. You don't want him to succeed. And in the end, he dies. He gets what he deserves, which I think is good. And then going back to Mamma Mia, I think Harry, you should show like you can be happy and you can be happy. You can be sensitive. And I don't know. I think Mamma Mia is just a bit different in that sense because there's not like a main defining character trait for Harry. He's just kind of like British, and he's just like very sensitive, and he's like very, I don't know, like soft spoken. But I think just in general, like portraying good character traits is good, and then like the really bad ones is like really bad on stage. That's the most you can really do with a character.
Yeah, and I think for Lumiere this year, this sort of aspect of the character wasn't really brought up to me until the end, because in the musical there are a bunch of scenes where Cogsworth, who's sort of like Lumiere's right-hand man, they both kiss each other on the cheeks a bunch, and we are sort of just, and then after that happens, it's just like, oh no, stop that, and we didn't really think anything of it. But then as we were sort of getting towards the end, Miss Moore had pulled us aside, and she's like, oh, she wasn't like criticizing us on how we did it because she knew we didn't really have any idea, but she was like, oh, the way you say stop it could be perceived as like homophobic. It's like, oh, it's wrong for like a man to kiss another man, we didn't want to portray that. So sort of for the both of us, we sort of had to take that into mind, sort of think how it's like, okay, we don't want the character to say it because we think that's bad. It's more just because it's like, oh, we don't want someone getting in our personal space like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. What I wonder what media will be like when our generation is in charge of it, because media is a reflection of culture, or the stereotypical culture as portrayed through the lens of the older generations, that being boomers and I always get these mixed up. Gen Z. Z. No, wait, no, that's us. Gen X. That is it. Yeah, so it'll be interesting what'll happen when we start to create this sort of media. This is just a question for y'all, moving on kind of the same topic, but in your experiences, like anecdotally, has media and these sort of musicals and plays, have they really had an impact on your decision or your decision-making process as a child?
I would say for me, we've touched this on a past episodes, but I'm kind of thinking back to where we were like coming into our own, like in like elementary school when we were had like notions about what it means to be a man and a woman, and I think we all came to like the conclusion that we didn't really pinpoint like one exact like movie or one exact like message that was given to us as to what like how these gender roles were reinforced. But I think big part of it is just like how in the past, just like the massive amounts of just like media just like continues, and especially like plays, musicals, just continues to like, I think it's gradually gotten better, but just like how it's perpetuated those stereotypes. And I think that's added to the effect that we feel like now we have like, we understand notions of like what it means to conventionally be feminine and masculine, and now we're here like discussing why like those roles are like dangerous.
Yeah, and just adding on to Theo's point about it being a collection of different things. I mean, I just have something in my notes that I pulled up. It was about like the study. I mean, it's just a really, really brief point, but it was just they surveyed these 80 kids, and they basically had them pick between stereotypically gendered toys, and their I guess what is it? Their dependent variable was how much TV these kids have watched. And the more TV that the kids watched, the more likely they were to pick the toy that was more stereotypically for their own gender. So I think that just goes to show that, yeah, I guess it must be some combination of all the things you're putting in. And I don't know. Yeah.
How extreme was the correlation? Because I know when I was growing up, or when I was in, I guess that period where I watched those types of Disney movies, I don't really think it had much of an impact on my decision making process, and I'd like to think that, but it may have triggered something in my mind that makes me like implicitly choose I guess things that I see as more masculine over things that I see as more feminine. I don't know.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just implicit. I mean, we talk about this at P4C. Shout out P4C. You should join, everyone. Female for Consent does amazing work. But one thing that we talked about was how consent is portrayed in the media. Just because, in romance movies, you're taught, oh, grab the girl and kiss her passionately in the rain and grab her and do all this stuff. But like, that's not how real relationships work. And that's not how they should work, because there's no consensual action in that. It's very manipulative and it's very, controlling. So, and then I think also to your point about like development and growing up as a child, I mean, I don't think you make these thoughts explicitly. Like, I think it's really implicit. For example, like if we're playing Phineas and Ferb in the schoolyard, I'm gonna want to be Phineas. I'm not gonna want to be like Baljeet, just because you want to be the guy who's like, oh, Phineas is like badass. Can I say that? Yeah, Phineas is like badass. He like builds all these cool stuff. Like, I don't think anyone on the schoolyard was like, I want to be the nerdy guy who's off like to the side. But I think that's just how we're taught. Like, we're taught these characters are cool. These characters are like get picked on because they're not cool. And so, do you really want to get picked on because you're not cool? No, you want to be Phineas. You want to be like Ash Ketchum. I don't know. Other children references.
Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense. I don't know. I feel like a big problem, though, is that when we already have all this, we talked a little bit about this. I was about to say years back, a few months ago, back on our episode with Promising Young Women. It was about how, with these heroes and these characters that are presented to us, there are years and years and years of different generations who have different, cultural values, and they're already the heroes and they're already the cool characters. And I just kind of I feel like it's tough because all that stuff is already out there for kids to see and for kids to, I guess, learn from. But I don't know, how do we reconcile that? Because, I mean, okay, this is kind of going on a different tangent, but Dude, I love Grease. I love the musical Grease so much. But the problem is, I know it's problematic. But I still I just still like it. I don't know. And it's kind of like the whole Harry Potter thing. Like, well, I guess it's a little different because that's just the author and the creator. But how do you.
Art from the artist?
Sorry?
Art from artists?
Yeah, art from artists. How do you do art from artists? I don't know.
Separate the art from artists.
Yeah, I love Kiss the Girl from Little Mermaid. I dig Grease and all that stuff. So I don't know what to do. Because I don't know. I just like it.
I mean, there's no problem in liking it in its art form, right? You can like a song that has completely obscene lyrics, right? But it has a good tune, so you got to listen to it, and that's pretty common. But to the broader point, I think that I don't know. Part of me wants to believe that when we have like if you can always appreciate your typical like fantasy plot where you have all these stereotypical men who live up to that stereotype and are successful, like the way it is now. Like sometimes I just want to watch one of those types of shows where it's like typical and like the outcome and that it'll be happily ever after, right?
Maybe it's fine for us, right? Because we understand. I think we all understand. Yeah. Hopefully, we all understand. Like that. Those kinds of things are problematic, and that we shouldn't be like projecting them onto ourselves. We understand that that's a bad thing. The problem is when children, young impressionable children, watch those things and they internalize those messages. Right. That's when it starts becoming an issue, because then, like Cole said, like you grow up learning that like this is what's cool, this is what's nerdy and bad and what we don't want to be, and what you learn as a kid like really sticks with you even like deep into adulthood. So I think what you're saying, I think it makes sense, right? Like people listen to rap songs with like the N-word in it, right? And people know it's problematic, but they listen to it because they like the beat. But when like a 6-year-old is listening to that, he's gonna start saying the N-word all over the place, and he doesn't actually know what it means, and that's a problem. Like that's an obvious problem, and it's kind of similar with like Disney princess movies. And when 6-year-olds watch it and they internalize those messages, that can be a problem.
Mm-hmm. I had a little thing about separating art from artists that kind of goes back to the question I gave to you two. For Lord of the Flies, I think one thing that's really interesting is that when William Golding intended it for it just to be all guys, portrayed by all guys, because that's what he grew up as a guy and he believed that's what made sense for him. He said inversely, if he was a girl, that he would make the characters all girls. But I think as society has progressed, I think just like those finite ideas of what it means to be a guy and a girl have kind of like it's just like the line's been like blurred but essentially I think what I like the most about our production is like with the cast, like when we were getting casted, it was entirely gender blind. So I think that kind of adds a little bit to the art versus artist. Like, it's a revered play, it's a revered story, a good like kind of like mental like is society inherently good or bad? But I think now we've kind of took it into our own and just used like what's good from the story, what's good, and just like took it into our own, I guess, and progressed it.
I mean, I see what you mean,
but I'm probably going to agree with you, just because like that's not fully separating the art from the artist, because it's still the intent of the artist is still there, it still lingers. But that's kind of how I interpret like what the good that we're perpetuating. But,
no, I mean, I agree. I mean, I agree with your point. I mean, because although the female identifying students are portraying still male characters,
no, I think
or they
it will. I guess the characters were written as as guys, William Golding's head, but I think we're pretty much just like we're not all guy. Like we have guy names, but we're not. It's just gender ambiguity. It's yeah.
Okay, then I think that's perfectly good. Yeah. I suppose in that sense you're allowing. I don't know. It's kind of like we are talking about with Luisa. I mean, you're allowing the, I guess, female identifying characters just to be boyish, just because that's who they are. I forget what I was gonna say about the other point though. Maybe somebody can pick it up while I think about it. What's it about?
I think Lord of the Flies is just an interesting example because it's supposed to be a bunch of little, I don't know, like beings that just represent society, right? And at the time of Golding, that was men, right? So that was part of the reason why he had it be all boys. So I just feel like it's hard. I mean, I like the book a lot because it speaks to the inherent flawedness of man as a whole, but I feel like it's kind of a difficult line to draw between that and sort of toxic masculinity. I mean, there definitely is toxicity, right, with Jack and the tribal mindset that could be connected to the sort of tribal mindset of, I don't know, like the sports teams when they took the field goal and ran it out of the stadium and trampled a bunch of people. But yeah.
I want to pose a new question. You still had a thought, right? Do you want to say it or?
Okay, I'll just toss it down real quick. But then we'll go right to your question. Okay. So I mean, I don't know. I just felt like, I mean, with Theo's example, it's unique because I mean they're interpreting the original text in a new way. But like in the future, I don't know. They're still the original. They're still the original book, and like let's say in the future, like if I wanted to show my kids Grease, then what do? If I love Grease, do I just preface them and say, kids, this movie is very problematic. Don't listen to anything they say, but just enjoy it.
Just listen to the music.
Yeah, just listen to the music.
Watch every single Trash Sticks episode.
Yeah.
You need to have the context.
I mean, when it comes down to it, you have to make sure that they're rooted in good morals, and that's the main purpose of parenting. And then maybe, I guess you can use Grease as an example of what, like, where this violates human morality and where that violates your moral compass.
But what if they see Danny and they're like, I want to be like Danny. That's the hero. That's the hero. I guess I'll just have to preface them and make sure they know. All right, back to Ajay.
Okay. My question. So, traditionally, like we've been talking, right? Men have been cast into hard, tough, independent, violent, most importantly, aggressively non-feminine roles, right? They're like warriors or something. I don't know, right? And I think as time has gone on, we've gotten a lot better. The film industry's gotten a lot better about having more of those kinds of female characters, right? Like strong, like headstrong, independent, like they're their own thing, they do their own thing. Those kinds of characters, I think they're popping up a lot more, which I think is great. I'm all for that. But I don't think the opposite is true for men. Like, think about it. Like, this is a super weird example, but I read this in a paper from University of North Carolina. In a commercial for, say, like a kitchen appliance, right? The men are the klutzes in the kitchen. They don't know how to operate the kitchen, right? And then they're doing something, and then the woman comes in, showcases the product, she uses it perfectly, everyone's happy. What's up with that? Why aren't men being cast in those kinds of caretaking, like cooking, those sorts of roles? What do you guys think on this?
Oh, I do have a thought. I mean, I think it's because, well, there's no one answer, but I remember we talked, I think it was with Dr. Judy Chu, and she brought up the whole point where, I think it was when we were talking about, I think it was, if I'm remembering right, it's about men wearing dresses and how that's totally like, would be shunned rather than I guess, female identifying students wearing like jeans. And I think we concluded that it was something to do with the fact that society deems quote unquote traditionally male traits as more beneficial to society rather than quote unquote female identifying traits. I mean, in that sense, we value those traits more. So therefore, it's seen as kind of like a loss when a male identifying character takes on the female identifying traits, rather than when the inverse happens, in which case it's seen as a gain. Like, wow, they're headstrong, they're go getters, they're getting it, rather than a male identifying character who's like, you know, good at cooking. I don't know. It's the different things our society values.
I mean, I would take it a step further and say a lot of it's rooted in homophobia. Just because, like, back to what I'm familiar with, like theater, it's not inherently cool to be a guy in theater. Like, the stereotype is that, like, 50% of the guys in theater are gay. And, I mean, it's just inherently homophobic that, you know, because if like, a guy is portrayed as, you know, cooking or, like, cleaning or, like, doing any, like, non-masculine things, so to speak, then they're not going to be revered by other guys because I think a lot of guys are inherently homophobic. I mean, just look around. I mean, for doing musicals, I've been called like fruity, I've been called gay, sort of stuff like that. I mean, it's just part of guy culture, which is super wrong and not okay at all. But I think just in that sense where it's like, why don't we have more guys that do X, Y, and Z? Why don't we have more guys that, you know, I don't know, like, I guess the example you used was cooking and like have more feminine traits like caretaking. I think that's why. I think a lot of guys just have inherent homophobia that they can't really get over and that we've been trying to get over for decades. And yes, we've gotten better at it, but it's still lingering in the media.
Yeah. I feel bad because I feel like you've talked a little bit.
I can go if you
All right, Jacob.
All right. Okay, come on. I feel like one of the reasons for that is, or the you say the inherent homophobia, that definitely is linked to what TJ was saying earlier about just the anti-feminine trait, the aggressively anti-feminine. I think that's the vocabulary you used, as like a stereotype or a trait. An ideal that is imparted on children by parents, right? And then also this is kind of a different point, but part of that also comes from the fact that humans are a socially creative species of life, right? And I don't know, people are going to hate me for saying this, but like statistically, right? Like, you know, women have on average, this is an average, on average, like women have 80% of the physical strength of men, right? You've heard that statistic, but from that, I feel like those little disparities, you can see this with race too, but those little disparities that exist between humans, they eventually become bigger, right? So like, you know, the stronger men were naturally selected or whatever, and that 80%, that's how we got to 80%. It may have originally been a lot less, and you know, the same applies for on the other side for women, right? I guess they've, you know, evolved to have this more long-term sort of local house oriented state of mind, right? But this is average. This is the average of you know, all female identifying versus all male identifying.
I think I get your point. My question is, well, then why is everyone not just super buff, right? Because speaking from personal experience, cleaning and cooking is hard. Like it takes a lot of power to like, just as an example, just to like making batters. That shit takes so much arm power. Like it's really hard. So then like the question becomes like, well, why isn't everyone super buff? Why aren't women buff and why aren't men buff? And like, why isn't that just a universally good trait? And like, why is it so like looked down upon when when women are big and strong. I don't know.
I mean, it's definitely not non-existent, right? Women probably are getting stronger also, but I feel like it's just a lot more of a thing for men, because there's extremely high social pressure to be that strong, headstrong, physically strong, independent, perhaps aggressive man, right?
Yeah. And then also I think conventionally, yeah, it's like the stereotypes is like men should be the strongest or whatever. But I think strength, mental, physical, whatever, is just revered as a good trait in general. So to Pajme's point about like why it seems like girl characters in media are being progressed more to what we agree is societally correct, and guy characters are more stereotypically, conventionally masculine. I think that it's just like traits. I said I think we've talked about this in the past, but traits that are thought as conventionally masculine, or how we interpret as masculine. I think are traits that I think are just good for each individual, just like being headstrong, being like strength, like willpower, and I think it's just really easy. It's really impactful for girls to see that, and I think that's universally kind of accepted. But the inverse of like when a guy is weak or showing his emotions, I think isn't as like societally accepted as like that's something that we need to show that is something we need to show our kids, but it's just like media it's catering back for like guys, I guess.
Yeah, and I think about like the buffness thing. I think it also has to do with the beauty standard, just because like there are jokes that like, oh, women don't go to the gym because they think they'll lift like one weight and they'll get like buff, and they don't want to be buff because that's not inherently like beautiful. So I think there's definitely a lot of societal pressure to not, I guess, for women to not be as strong, because I don't know, because I guess the media teaches women to be more submissive and to have the man take care of anything, when inherently that's just not true. That's just not beneficial. And I don't know, I think that's definitely a very dangerous idea to push.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the way I see it, I think it's kind of a combination of I think it's kind of like a combination of all your guys' points. Because I mean, we were talking about how, I mean, the I don't know what it would be called. I guess it would also be called homophobia, kind of. Well, it's the beauty standard, like you mentioned. I mean, like, I suppose if, I guess, female identifying people are told that you don't find success by being buff. I mean, why would you want to be buff? And in that sense, it's kind of self-perpetuating, like Jacob said. I mean, like, if you don't have those skills and you don't pass down those values, those traits, then both, I guess, biologically and culturally, you're going to get those disparities. And so I would just say it's a little bit of both. I don't know. Okay.
I think we explored a whole lot here. So I think on that note, thank you guys so much for joining us. This was a really like phenomenal conversation, and I'm really glad you guys can join. You guys, media watchers, not so much in the theater, but you guys chipped in so much.
I love. Okay.
Yeah. No. You're right. But anyways, thank you guys so much for being here. I really enjoyed having this discussion. And on that note, we'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you so much for watching.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.